Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Unfolding Tomorrow. Unfolding Tomorrow is an event series organized by Aalto Ventures Program and Aalto Entrepreneurship Society. These events bring together the brightest minds from business, academia, and the government to discuss together what we can do today to make tomorrow better. The event topics come from the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Today, we are here to discuss SDG number 5, gender equality, and more specifically, target 5.5, ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. We have with us representatives from academia, startup world, venture capital, and the government. They will each give a brief introductory talk from their own perspectives, and then we will have a panel discussion. The chat is open, so you can post comments or questions at any time of the event, and then we will lift those up in the panel discussion. My name is Marja Niemi, and I'm your host this evening. I represent Aalto University School of Science and the Equal Career Paths for Women Now project. In Now project, Aalto University partners with the trade union Academic Engineers and Architects in Finland Tech and several Finnish universities and universities of applied sciences to support and promote equal employment and career development for all genders. Our project produces topical knowledge about the causes and consequences of gender segregation, especially in the field of technology. The project also creates pilots and consolidates new forms of support for students and professionals of all genders. Okay, before introducing the first speaker, I would like to remind you about the chat, so please post any questions to the speakers. You can post them to an individual speaker or the whole panel, and then we will come back to those in the panel discussion. Now, let me introduce our first speaker of the evening, Pia Kuosmanen. Pia is a co-founder of Wellbe, an early-stage startup that aims to eliminate burnout by building workplaces where everyone wins. Welcome, Pia. The stage is yours.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, good evening. I hope you've had a fantastic day. My name is Pia, and like mentioned, I'm from a startup called Wellbe. And I only have 3 major things that I want to talk about in this introductory speech. The first one is why it matters, in my perspective as a startup founder, and how you can implement change in your own environment, and finally, what you can practically do to improve equality in the startup field specifically. So first of all, since my business is building winning workplaces, I come from the perspective of diversity always improves the kinds of soft skills that actually create the best possible winning workplace culture in any organization. These kinds of skills include things like ability to have conversations with different kinds of people, empathy, emotional intelligence, and the ability to place yourself in general to the shoes of someone else who doesn't necessarily share your life experience or doesn't share a similar background with you. This usually leads to people having to have discussions and contracting with one another about how they work together, what are their values, what would they like to achieve with the work that they do. And if you already sort of think that the people around you look like you and are like you and think like you, you're maybe less likely to actually address these issues in your company, for example. And later down the line, you're going to have to recruit some people who are not like you, and you're going to be screwed, essentially, if you haven't been able to think about these things in advance. So that's the perspective that I take on why gender equality and diversity in general is so important. Now, for my company specifically, we sort of started from this angle. So we're 3 co-founders. We're 3 different nationalities, 3 different mother tongues, but we have one language, English, and we have one vision on how we want to change things. And it's already been a really great adventure. So even though we operate here in Finland, I feel like my co-founders, who have wildly different experiences from myself, have been able to call out some assumptions that I've had about how things should be, because I'm operating on my comfort zone in a lot of senses compared to them. And we're also, by the way, different genders. So that's also, I think, a great strength. And honestly, I prefer it that way as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you can do, and I have a few practical examples. First of all, if you're an investor, or if you have power over what kinds of companies make it after their first year or whatever, I really hope that you already have in place some policies or programs or ways of reaching out to people especially in minority groups or not in the mainstream group of people of different colors, people of different backgrounds, people of different nationalities, different genders. Because I think we already all know and share the understanding of common research is that diverse teams do better. There's more revenue, they're more productive, they have more impact, and it's a no-brainer, but still we see the mismatch between this ideal and this research and the kind of investment we see in the startup world, which still mainly 9 out of 10 times goes to all male founders who are Finnish origin in Finland, right? Now, if you're starting out as a founder, now you're setting up your team. Now, a few things that you usually think about are like, okay, what kinds of skills do I need? What kind of experience do I need? Who are the kind of people that I can make this work? Now, I suggest that in addition to these factors, you also consider, do these people have different kinds of experiences from me? Do they have different kinds of backgrounds or cultures or, points of view that are going to challenge me down the line as a founder? So as a team, we're more ready to face whatever the world throws at us. And if you're, for example, international, you're already going to have access to international markets through your founding team. And if you don't have any women in your team, how are you ever going to address female consumers, for example? So think about these things because that makes a huge difference to how well your company is going to do in the future. I'm betting on it. All right. Now, finally, I have a few key takeaways, essentially. So whatever you do, keep in mind that if you're not already doing something to improve on diversity or making an effort to find marginalized groups and support them, then now's the time. Now's the time to be on the right side of history. And finally, as a founder, I would never consider setting up a company with people who look like me, think like me, and have the same experiences as I do, because I don't think that would succeed. And that's my intro. Thanks very much. Hope you have a good session.
Thank you so much, Pia. Very interesting points that you lifted up. Our next speaker is adjunct professor and senior university lecturer Saija Katila from Aalto University School of Business. Saija's research deals, for example, with gender and diversity in management. Welcome, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Maria. I'm the slides person here, so others didn't bring any, so I have all for everyone. In my presentation, I will be briefly discussing women's position in Finnish society and labor market in particular, and pretty quickly move forward to discuss what are the root causes of the gender gap we witness in our society. In my mind, drawing from a doing gender theoretical framework. The global gender gap index portrays Finland as number 2 in the world, so we have a lot to be grateful for. We have great gender parity in education, But the exceptionally high educational level of Finnish women don't seem to translate into senior positions as managers or senior officials, nor does it seem to translate into estimated income or senior positions in the boards of publicly listed companies. So there's a lot of good, but the gap is getting wider the higher up we go. And my explanation from the research perspective is that it's linked to cultural practices of doing gender. And when we talk about doing gender, we are not talking about biological differences between men and women, but rather to interactional, relational accomplishment of creating gender in our everyday life. The way we open doors for women, or how it's okay for women to go into toilet in large groups in bars while men are not allowed to do that. So the nature of this interaction or doing gender is always normative. So there are appropriate ways of being a female and a male in our society, and we tend to reproduce these in our daily interactions. And they are very strongly ingrained also in organizational practices like recruitment, assessment, promotion, communication, meeting practices, all kinds of practices. The way we do gender is part of the puzzle and becomes kind of very difficult to detect how the practices are actually gendered. We can see the doing of gender in the gendering of hobbies. It starts when the child is born, it starts right there. The way we talk to kids, the way we promote their hobbies or they sort of characters. In the gendering of consumption, in the gendering of media, who is portrayed and how they are portrayed, in the gender of educational choices, in the gendering of careers and work. And the outcome is often that we start seeing women and men as kind of having these essential characteristics, even though it's something that we recreate in our daily, everyday lives. In different domains of the society, at home, preschool, school, university, at work. So it's very strongly ingrained in our social fabric in multiple, very complex ways. If we think about women and they progress in organizational hierarchies, there are the cultural stereotypes that are very strong and still very much alive. So if we think about femininity, we link it with being dependent, emotional, passive, sensitive, quiet, graceful, innocent, weak, nurturing, self-critical, soft, sexually submissive, and accepting. While we see masculinity as independent, non-emotional, aggressive, tough-skinned, competitive, clumsy, experienced, strong, active, self-confident, hard, sexually aggressive, and rebellious. So very two different ways of seeing what is femininity and masculinity. And it doesn't mean that no man or woman would be like this. This is not the point. But these are cultural stereotypes what we tend to kind of link to female and male bodies. And when we kind of think about the progression in organizational hierarchies, the issue is that what we think is masculine is a perfect match with what we think is managerial behavior. So this is called the phenomenon think manager, think male, and it's very automatic. And it's not something that, for example, men would be doing to women. That's not my point. The question is that it's interactional. It's something that also, because it's cultural, it's something that women do as well. So it's very, very common that we attach these managerial characteristics easier to male bodies, to masculinity. For example, a woman who is very opinionated, we often might characterize her as being bossy or even bitchy. And the same behavior in a man we can characterize as having leadership potential. So the way the exact same behavior is assessed differently. And this is the way we do gender in our society. So, another issue. We have a very strong belief in meritocracy in Finnish society, Nordic society, and elsewhere. But when we start looking at how is competence constructed, it often appears to be very masculinely constructed to begin with. So again, it's ingrained in the very practices through which we organize. This slide is about the Swedish study, but we have very similar results from Finland, where Meriläinen and Tienari did a study of headhunters looking for top management candidates. Very similar results, so that actually what we are looking is a very narrow understanding of who can fit. It's kind of being 40 to 50 years, male, cultivated, having a wife who is presentable, taking care of the home, high tolerance level, good physical condition, etc. So already this is doing masculinity. The criteria, the competence, the way it's constructed is doing masculinity, and thus, again, it's more difficult to see women. And the practices are very exclusive in this respect. And what they call it is kind of like homosocial practice, where the tendency of the top management to recruit younger versions of themselves. It's easy to see them as competent in a similar way they have been competent. So what is the outcome of all of this? It's the vertical, very strong vertical and horizontal gender segregation that is prevalent in Finnish society, the gender pay gap, and also the gendered care arrangement. And all of these work together, creating this very complicated structure. And what I'm proposing here, that to bring about change, we need to create change in all these different societal domains and kind of work simultaneously in multiple areas. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Saija, for the research perspective. Very interesting indeed. And then from the governmental side, we have Jyrki Pulkkinen, the Ambassador for Innovation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please, Jyrki, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I think now quite many of you might actually be wondering why I'm here, and not somebody else who is more in gender equality questions. But I'll tell you a little bit why I'm here. First, I will give you a little bit overview on a campaign, global campaign that's name is Generation Equality. Most probably you have heard about it. It's also the campaign that our Prime Minister was kind of launching in Paris this last summer, and you could see that she was so committed on the campaign. So what's all about this campaign? I'll give a short overview, and then after that I give you one or two examples of the work of the campaign, practical examples of the work of the campaign that is going on. So this Generation Equality campaign is a 5 years campaign. It's not a one project, it's a huge campaign. It's a global campaign coordinated by UN Women. It's addressing the new generation of women, girls, and young women who are eager to go to work and the business and the society, and try to give the possibility for them to have a equal opportunity on their life. We know that the equality of women and men is really different states in different parts of the world. In Finland we have succeeded quite well. Of course there's work still to do. Compared to countries that have just recently seen on TV, for example, in Afghanistan, where the things are going backwards. So it's a huge area for us to work, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been committed, just like Finland as a whole has been committed on this topic, and it has been a priority for our foreign policy and also for our development policy for tens of years already. And that also explains why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have a key role also in this campaign here in Finland. Although, just like SDGs, we can see that there is work here in Finland to do, and then there is also some cooperation to coordinate at the global level. So we are there in the intersection of this work in Finland and also the work globally. The campaign has been, the whole campaign has been divided in different coalitions and themes. I give you a kind of overview of the themes that are there. We are not involved as an active partner in all of these themes, but we are leading only one specific theme. One is gender-based violence, that is quite obvious theme. Economic justice and rights of women is one. Bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. That's a long acronym. Even my colleagues in gender issues struggle sometimes to say this, the whole thing. Feminist action for climate justice is one theme. Then technology and innovation for gender equality, that's the theme that Finland is leading. So that's why I'm here. So I'm the ambassador for innovation. So we are working together with our gender team. And then the sixth one is feminist movement and leadership. So you can see that this is all about, and Finland has picked up something that is very suitable for us. It's the innovation, technology, and gender equality. There are cross-cutting themes within all of these that are somehow embedded in all these themes. Is women, peace and security. That is something that's growing. I could say I'm coming from Africa. My previous post was in Nigeria, so you could see that that women are very much involved in peace in countries where there is unsecure and violence going on. Intersectionality is one, of course. That's quite obvious as well. These are those kind of themes that has been somehow embedded in all those themes. Again, these themes and also the technology and innovation for gender equality has been divided in sub-themes. They call them kind of blueprints. And the coalition on innovation and technology for gender equality has identified that on this theme we should actually work more in bridging the gender gap in digital access and competencies. It's quite good. Investing in feminist technology and innovation sounds good. Also, there are entrepreneurs here, so for me at least. Building inclusive, transformative, and accountable innovation ecosystems. I think I sign that as well. And preventing and eliminating online and tech-facilitated gender-based violence and discrimination. So that makes also very much sense. Again, this is global, this is huge. It has been divided in 6 different sub-themes again, or commitments. And there are more and more commitments coming under these 4 themes. I do have a list here, but I think I just don't want to bother you with too many details. But I can say that there are multi-stakeholder approach on this, and there are more and more companies, civil society organizations, public organizations committing themselves to do something practical under these themes, and they are divided in different commitment groups. Instead of going all those commitments, I will give 2 examples not from Finland. We can discuss about what is going on in Finland later on. But I give two examples of those global commitments that we have been doing together with UNICEF and some other stakeholders. UNICEF is quite important partner for us. And as you know, UNICEF have just moved 2 innovation hubs to Finland, or they are in process of doing that. So they are very much leading in many innovative initiatives in the world at the moment, and we are working with them. One is the investments. It's one of the key problems if you want to commercialize something and scale up with commercial terms. It's the investment, lack of investments. And we could see that quite easily in maybe some of the countries where women can't even own their own company, and not to speak about get any investments from banks or any other investment agency. So the lack of investments is a difficult problem globally. And of course, it's sometimes, if the ideas are related to gender equality, also the Finnish investors are not necessarily that eager to invest, so I assume. So this practical thing we are doing together with UNCDF, UNICEF, and Volta Capital, those are global operators. And it's about digital literacy equity outcomes fund. It's kind of impact investment fund. And it's targeting the impact or outcomes that it's targeting is skills, jobs, education, safety, health, and inclusion of girls and young women. And it tried to scale up these themes and the kind of capacity gaps through commercial actions. It's related to STEM education of girls, which seems to be one of the key components if we want that the girls are more interested on technology and technical occupations. Secondly, another example that I give you is related to gender-based violence. It's a social media platform for girls and women, a virtual safe space designated for girls and women. So it's Open Society Foundation, University, U.S. Agency for International Development, etc., etc. They are developing virtual space, social media, especially now when COVID has during the COVID, the physical safe places has been not that easy to access. So it's creating something virtual and specifically addressing the violence of girls. So I think all of this is something like in innovation phase at the moment. It has been they are busy to create these applications and the funds. And the next challenge, of course, during this 5 years is to scale it up. So let's see how it goes. But it's a very big challenge, and it needs all our efforts. Okay, this is my input in the beginning, so I look forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jyrki. Very inspiring to hear about these concrete goals in the Generation Equality Program. And now it's time to move on to our final speaker of the evening, Ekaterina Gianelli. Ekaterina is a partner at InVenture, which is a Nordic venture capital firm backing early-stage startups. Please, Ekaterina, the stage is yours.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here. So my name is Ekaterina Gianelli, and I'm here to represent the tech entrepreneurship side or space. I've been a partner of InVenture. It's a Nordic technology fund that has been around for over 10 years, and we've been working with over 80 portfolio companies over the past years. We typically invest at the early stage and then work with these companies to help them grow, so fueling the innovation, helping them build their teams and helping expand globally. Originally, I'm from Moscow. I came to Finland about 15 years ago and have been working with tech companies, so in different sides of the tech space over the past 15 years. When I started or when I entered the space, I realized that the space is not diverse, and I promised myself that I will do everything I can to diversify the space through my action, the teams that I want to work with or choose to work with, as well as the companies that I back today as an investor. So for me today, when I talk to teams and they don't think about diversity or they are not diverse enough from the beginning, it's a big red flag, and I wouldn't like to back or invest into these teams. Today, we work with a lot of portfolio companies and are able to recruit or to affect the recruitment in the portfolio, hopefully fueling more diverse and inclusive tech space. The situation is not great in our portfolio. Only about 30% of the total workforce is women. Only about 20% of women are in the leadership, and less than 15 are taking board roles. So the numbers are quite bad, and we are doing everything, or we are set to do everything we can to change the numbers. Another aspect that worries me a lot is that I believe that Finland is having a big talent crisis, or will be having a big talent crisis in the next 10 years. So I think we need to address the gap as quickly as possible here in Finland, especially when it comes to technology and having diverse workforce in the technology space. That's a short introduction or short intro to what I do and the entrepreneurship, and looking forward to discussing this further in the panel.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Sorry. Now, as you can see, we are organizing the stage for the panel discussion. I just wanted to remind you that the chat is still open and you can use it to post questions if you like.
What's the border? Should I'm going to place the border here. Of the thing right here.
Okay, I think we are ready for the discussion. Very nice, quick rearrangement of the stage. Thank you everyone once again for the nice opening talks. Maybe we start with a little bit of numbers. Technology Industries Finland has stated that we need 130,000 experts in the field of technology in the next 10 years. And actually the proportion of women who start the studies in technology in Finland is only 18%. And that's the lowest in Nordic countries. For example, in Sweden, it's 29%. So how do you see this for our competitiveness for Finland? Maybe Jyrki, do you want to start?
Well, I think the key for this problem, of course, is in education system and why girls are not picking up STEM education, for example. What is the problem? We should actually dig it more broadly. That why this happening? And although in education we officially actually give the possibility for everybody to go there, but it doesn't happen. Yeah. So it must be somewhere in our culture. Well, now the link to our competitiveness, I'm not sure if that is the only measure that we should actually look at. It's human rights issue first, and then the competitiveness. And of course, if we don't use the capacity of almost half of the population, that's you can, right away understand. It's not good for our competitiveness as well. So, it's a talent cap that we currently have.
Yes. Saya, do you want to give some perspective on this, why girls don't choose technology? As Jyrki was stating, this is probably the root problem that we have.
I think Jyrki had it when you said something about culture. It's linked to the culture of these institutions, educational institutions. I've been working with my colleague Markka Kivijärvi from Aalto University on her data on game industry, female players in the game industry, and their experiences of the educational institutions have been quite poor in a way that it's hard for them to be there because of the quite masculine culture and harassment and that's kind of daily life, and also the discouragement already in high school that the teachers are kind of, rather than encouraging, discouraging, for example, information technology routes. So that's kind of very complicated issue to change, but I think it's a cultural issue.
Yeah.
And of course, I think overall there is still a very bad lack of role models. So, for example, if I think about the tech space, we haven't had enough tech entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs with a different background, diverse backgrounds of women. So it's luckily changing, or it's getting better, but I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. As like coming from a very personal perspective, I'm an engineer by training here from Aalto University, but certainly like entering the startup space, you don't see a lot of women or people of color or anything. So it's a very male-dominated space, and it does sort of make you reflect, like, how do I fit in, and do I have to be more masculine to survive in this space and be successful?
I think there's also a lot to do to improve the financial education of women overall. I think very few women understand what ownership means, how to ask for ownership or how to get to ownership, how to invest. So basically anything on the financial side hasn't really been, I think, a topic that we've been discussing with friends, family, or whoever. And I think that plays also a big part.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to go forward with Pia's point about the entrepreneurship and whether the women students feel that it's for them. We did in this Now project that I mentioned in the introduction a survey for Aalto's students, and actually saw that there is a significant difference between men and women when they were asked whether they feel welcomed in the startup community that we have in Aalto, and is very important to us. So what do you think, what could we do to change this? How could we make it more kind of welcoming for women?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I'm going to need everybody's help here. But I think one important thing is really to try and lift up the role models, try to bring out the kind of like different kinds of examples of being an entrepreneur. And one of the key challenges that I experience is that I feel my startup is we're very impact driven. Like it's very important to us that the change that we create in the world is a positive one, and we help people with what we do. And the very sort of strong, just growth-driven, profit-making kind of discourse that takes place in the startup ecosystem doesn't necessarily match those values that I have. And generally, I do tend to hear that female-owned startups tend to be more impact-driven rather than profit-driven. And so that already is a bit of a mismatch, and it might feel like you don't stand a chance in that sort of environment with your idea or with the kind of stuff that you want to do. Mm-hmm. I don't have a solution, I'm just bringing it up, and I'm hoping someone else will
just to build on your point, I think
Yeah.
as an investor for us, it's not either or, I think it's both.
Right.
And for us, of course, diversity is a sign of good business and make it like a good sign that things are run properly in the company. So I don't think it's either or. As in, when we invest in businesses today, I think for us, it's one of the most important criteria, of course, in addition to impact.
Yeah, last week I participated least developed countries conference here in Helsinki, and there was one researcher who actually had researched the influence of STEM education campaigns to girls and boys. Yeah, she found out that that it can increase girls' participation or interest on technical jobs if they are exposed on this kind of education, but it doesn't increase the boys' exposure anymore. So it's basically they keep it as it is. So it looks to me that that this kind of special campaigns in a certain stage in school could actually increase the interest of girls. But at the same time also that in countryside, in rural settings, girls and women are more bound by the norms, the traditional norms. What girls are supposed to do in their life when they grow up. And in cities, in urban setting, they are more free to go to work, especially on those that are not that traditionally female kind of expected jobs. So it shows the power of tradition and culture quite clearly that it changed the whole situation depending where you are living. And of course, between countries, there's huge differences in these cultural issues. But,
Saija, have you seen in research the differences between different countries and how the environment affects?
Of course that affects, but even I would say in Finland, the regional differences of what is seen appropriate and also different organizations. So I wouldn't kind of look so closely on national cultures. They are important, but also organizational cultures, how organizations kind of create these possibilities within their own cultures. But can I go back to her point?
Sure.
Yes, okay. I think it was very important when you said about the impact-driven startups of women, and what we did a study of Helsinki Think Company, which is a startup incubator kind of University of Helsinki and City of Helsinki. And when they started the space, it had the problem that what they first kind of tried to replicate the very typical startup entrepreneurship, profit-driven Silicon Valley type of events, and they didn't attract any audience because the University of Helsinki Central Campus, there are humanities and social sciences, and they had very different values and interests. So they were kind of fighting back that we don't want this type of space. We want more of this impact-driven space where we can create different types of entrepreneurship and kind of also with more social agenda. So I think it would be important to diversify the what is done in this type of spaces, so that it would be more inviting to change makers of different kind.
I think we're also mixing two different things, to be honest. So female entrepreneurship doesn't have to be impact entrepreneurship. I mean, these are two very different areas, right? So I think overall entrepreneurship has to be diverse no matter what. And then, of course, also overall, we would love to see more businesses thinking about the impact from the very beginning. But it's not that all the women-run businesses are doing something impactful.
But it was in general sort of that how you can diversify these type of spaces. It's kind of having more diversified kind of business ideas portrayed, which would attract different types of audiences.
That's right.
Not only the sort of very business-driven. Of course, we need business-driven businesses.
That's right. And of course, there are a lot of opportunities that previously haven't been addressed. As in, like, we didn't have, for example, female entrepreneurs thinking about or creating femtech product or technologies that are meant for women, just because, there were no female founders. So these opportunities were completely unaddressed. And now, of course, we see more and more businesses in that area. And then maybe on the diversity topic, I think, again, from what we see in the portfolio, those companies that are working on something more impactful, it's much easier for them to attract talent very early on, and it's much easier for them to attract funding, which is, again, a great development for Finland.
I'm really glad to hear it. Yeah, it gives me hope.
Same.
It was very interesting to hear the concrete goal in this generation equality campaign on this feminist technology and innovation. So I wanted to ask Ekaterina, how do you see this? Is it already there in your work? Do you see these kinds of startups?
It's totally not there. I mean, there's a lot to be done still, but I think the trend is at least positive, and we've been seeing more and more development in the area and more attention to the area.
Okay, maybe still we were talking about the students. There was a question, what concrete advice would you give our students when they don't have that many role models in leadership or in entrepreneurship? How to kind of pursue these careers still?
Maybe one thing I can start, one thing that I didn't think about at all when I was a student. Back then I was trying to optimize maybe for my CV, while now I think the best thing you can do is optimizing for people to work with. So I would, related to this optimizing for wide network. So I would just try to find the best people who inspire you, whoever they are, and then reach out to them and try to work with them and not think about your CV or salary or whatever it is.
I'd like to pick up on that because that's totally 100% my experience at Aalto. I always say that Aalto University gave me a degree, but everything else I did around that gave me an education. And I continue to rely on those networks that being active around the campus gave me during that time. And I would like to add to that, another thing that I feel is key is to think about what your values are and what's the kind of thing that you could be working on even if nobody paid you money to do it. What really inspires you, because if you want to set up a company, you're going to grind for a while with that before it starts to work. And then if it starts to work, you're going to be committed to that for quite a few years. So if you end up doing stuff with cool people that you appreciate and enjoy, and if you end up working for something that you're passionate about, you can never go very wrong. Like, you will find a way, even if you don't know immediately how that's going to happen, but you're going to be able to navigate that so much better when that's clear to you. And I don't think school gave me very good tools in figuring that out, to be honest. So maybe schools could do better in that respect, like finding your strengths kind of thing.
Great advice. And of course, you are one role model for the students who are studying now.
Sorry, that seems like a lot of pressure.
Sorry. But yeah. A question from the audience. Related to role models, we would like to have more women in the leadership, but we don't want to hire women only because of their gender. So how do you see this, and how to go about it, and how to kind of make the point of improving the gender balance in management?
I can start.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, it's very important that you start doing it very early on, because if you miss the opportunity, it's very difficult to fix. If you are a team of 10 people sharing the same background, try finding someone else to join you. So I think, first of all, start very early on and make sure that's the priority for the leadership or for the founding team. That would be the first step. I guess the second step is, really committing to what is it you are trying to get, as in, like, what is the role or what is the type of experience you need on board, what is it that you lack. So don't hire anyone who would be exactly as you, like, not culture fits, but culture adds for the company. And then, of course, the third point is that you have to be very, very determined to measure the results and follow up very quickly, because you can only change the stuff that you measure, and if you don't, then it easily slips. Otherwise, don't expect people to apply to your company, as in you have to do everything you can to fix an issue if you admit that that's an issue. I don't know if you had similar experiences with recruitment, or if you would give similar tips.
In terms of recruitment, do anonymous recruitment, and be very open-minded about reaching out to your immediate network, I guess, would be what I will definitely do by the time we start recruiting for our company, for sure.
I would also emphasize this sort of being more reflexive about how competence is constructed and how it might be gendered already, what you're actually looking for, and being kind of rethinking how you kind of construct competence and who fits your narrow criteria. How to kind of broaden it, what you said, that don't hire exactly the same type of person over and over again.
And maybe one thing that you others might have noticed as well, I think in the news there's been some discussions about it as well, is how you word things for new recruiting, like how do you formulate stuff, because the way we talk about technology, for example, is very sort of, and you might know about this especially, like very masculine terminology. I'm not an expert, so you don't necessarily, as a woman, don't feel like that speaks to you. Is that familiar to anyone here?
Totally. We've been just recruiting one person for the investment analyst role,
Right.
and investment analyst has a very masculine type of feeling to it. So majority of the applications were originally from male candidates. So we really had to push the extra mile and try to change the words and engage more people into the search. And then maybe coming to the question, actually, well, one simple thing that someone or the person asking could do is, well, ask from, if you are trying to recruit, for example, a female, try asking your female friends, because the networks that we would have are totally different, for example, than your male peers.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Maybe just to add a little bit on that, I think how to get, the question how to get, more women in leadership position, in the working life. Totally two different businesses. If you go through employment, if you go through business, establishing a business, just like you guys have been doing. So, if I was young, I would, and I want to have a leadership position, I would actually establish a company of my own, then, it's right away, it's all in your hands, you are recruiting, then, you are not recruited, so you can tailor-made it for you. And that would be my advice also to my girl, or, if my daughter, if she were still, thinking where to go, she has chosen already, but, establish a company. It's not easy way though, but, it's the way that, you can get a lot of decision-making power for yourself. There's no glass ceiling other than the investment. Maybe we call that, how to get investments on your company. So if there's some structural or cultural issues related to being a bankable company in the end of the day.
Can I actually pick up on that?
Sure.
Because one of the things that I guess comes up with women, and let's think about, like, for example, your daughter or something, is confidence. And I felt for a really long time, and I know a lot of my female peers have felt the same way, that they're not competent enough, they're not experienced enough, they're not smart enough, or whatever, to apply for leadership positions. And only like after a certain time, I sort of realized that that's not the case for most people who apply for these jobs, because no one's ever qualified for the kind of like dream lineup of stuff that companies are looking for. So I'm going back all the way to the question of what can a student do, like just apply confidently for as high positions as you can, as early as you can, if you think that you have even some of the skills that are required. Because women, I think, don't do that often enough, is what I hear, I think, on research as well.
Yes, and also our recruiting services have noticed a huge difference in the way when they are teaching them students to write their CVs and help them to make the applications. Women are very insecure, even their scores are much higher than the guys. The guys are just saying, oh, I can do this and this and that, and the women are just downplaying everything. Well, I really can't, even though on paper they are better. And still the way they write their CVs they appear poorer in competence.
Of course, that is cultural.
That is cultural. That's doing gender.
Exactly.
That's doing gender.
It is. So you can apply basically a leadership position to learn to be a leader.
Yes,
or
yes.
you can then wait until you learn and then apply it. And that's, and then it never comes.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Maybe a little bit more about inclusive leadership. I think we touched upon it already a little bit, but how well do you think that the companies in Finnish scene, or how well does the kind of Finnish working culture take inclusive leadership into account? Do we know it? Are we good at it? We are supposed to be the kind of model country for equality. Does it apply also to this?
Difficult to say because I have been always working in the working environment where the majority of my colleagues have been women. So even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it used to be very male-dominated, but it has changed in few tens of years to be, most of the diplomats, even the leading positions are taken by women. So it's. I don't see anything specific that it's a development that has taken us so far already. So it's quite natural for me.
Maybe Saya, do you want to comment?
Yes. I think the whole idea of inclusion and diversity is still very young in Finland, and we are not really, I think, not quite there yet. And if we think about, for example, the position of immigrant labor force in Finnish labor market, it's ridiculous. Discrimination is just every day. And the way how kind of, if we look at the intersectionality of gender and ethnicity and race, how they play together in the labor market, it gets even worse. So I think we are just taking the early steps, what it actually would mean in organizations to be inclusive and kind of pay attention to diversity and inclusion.
I agree, and of course originally, or if you think about, 50, 100 years back, we didn't really have much workforce from elsewhere, as in no foreign labor in Finland. So I agree, I think it's very early in the development that we are now, and a lot to be done.
I agree with if we speak about inclusiveness, because in general balance we are getting in many places, but intersectionality and inclusiveness, we are still quite in the early.
I think we're just not yet maybe used to working with different cultures enough. So I would love to see that changing slowly, and I think it's changing, but there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also have done some work with a non-profit that helps internationals set up their own companies and integrate into the labor market. And there are just like some ridiculous practical things, like the working language of a large international Finnish company is Finnish. And then it becomes really difficult to recruit anyone with an international background who doesn't speak Finnish, because you would have to translate everything you have in the company. So maybe start with documenting stuff in English and maybe get that international hire in early on, so you don't have to encounter this down the line. And it's surprising, but at the same time, globally, where like I lived in China, and I've worked in Uganda and Kenya a little bit as well, and it's like, as a woman, I'm better off in Finland for sure. But then if you live in an international city like Shanghai, working with people from all kinds of backgrounds is much more of a given. So there's still work to be done in Finland as well, I feel, for sure.
If I think overall about our tech ecosystem, I think the ecosystem has, of course, been developing very nicely during the past 10 years. So thanks to Slush, the attitude towards entrepreneurship and tech has changed big time. Funding is no longer an issue for entrepreneurs. I think if you have a good business, there are many ways to raise funding. But then talent is a massive problem for all of our scale-ups or startups, or all the companies in the technology space. It's going to get much worse during the next 10 years. So that's something that we really need to figure out. And then, of course, we do manage to bring some foreign experts into the country. But then, unfortunately, we still keep losing many because of the lack of English daycare, or lack of support for the partners, or some stupid bureaucracy. So again, I think that that is for sure the priority for the whole tech space or government, to figure out what to do, how to bring more people, and how to make sure that they stay without leaving.
Yeah, and if we want to reach for the international markets, then it would be just
exactly,
stupid
and
not
the talent markets are global today. So all the people who are in Finland, as in all the Finns, can easily now work remotely for big tech companies globally. So I think we are getting into a more and more dangerous position. So if we want to be the leading hub in 5 to 10 years, I think we really need to nail down or figure out the right strategy today.
Definitely.
At the same time, it is good to understand also that this internationalization and globalization of the businesses is also affecting our cultural diversity. So all the companies look the same. They speak the same language. all over the world. It's good for business, but if you look at from small languages like Finnish language, we are fused to Sami language. We are disappearing. So
True.
yeah.
Yes.
In kindergarten, you go to English kindergarten, to English school, then you go to university, take the English master's courses, make your PhD on English, and then go to English companies, global companies. That's what we do. And the backside is that that cultural diversity is dying. So.
Yeah, that's a very valid point.
One more thing I could actually add very quickly is that we've now we've discussed with around 50 or 60 different organizations like HR and leadership in the course of trying to run our business. And the companies that have to compete for talent globally are the ones who also do best in inclusive leadership and practices of taking care of employee well-being, which usually involves stuff that also allows for different kinds of backgrounds and points of view. But as soon as you don't have that fear of losing the talent that you desperately need to do your business to your competitor, then it's another story already, because the incentive is not as urgent for you to really pay attention to how inclusive you are or how well you take care of your people. So that's also a bit sad, but I'm hoping that will change.
Yeah. Some of you already mentioned intersectionality, and I think that's a kind of important aspect to discuss as well. And is discussed more and more all the time, and I think that's a good thing. But we have also noticed, today, that there is still a lot to do just with gender equality. So how to lead kind of diversity and inclusion work in such a way that these are not kind of taken as opposites or kind of taking away from each other different kinds of diversity. So, for instance, gender and ethnicity, that they are kind of, if we do some work for inclusivity, then it's kind of benefits all of these different aspects of diversity, and how to kind of lead this inclusivity work in a smart way so that people see that it's kind of good for everybody and not just picking up one aspect.
Well,
Looking at Saija all the time. But
if you look at the most innovative hubs in the world, where innovations and new companies and new ideas are coming from, those are the places where they are very inclusive and very kind of quite variety of people coming together. It's very kind of how to say. Progressive kind of culture that that invites people from everywhere, all kind of people. So that's where the innovations are growing, and the business seems to be growing on the top of the innovation. So I think that's good proof already that that inclusiveness is really paying off.
Yes.
So most probably inside of the companies it's the same. So
yeah. A lot of studies back that up.
Exactly.
That inclusive environment
There's data
and
for that,
more diversity means more profitable business.
I kind of feel that it would be wise to still focus on those groups that are most marginalized in the society, because we can't kind of, I know this inclusion, diversity talk is, so let's include everyone in every single possible way, but I think it's not possible to do it like that. We need to somehow focus and kind of educate ourselves with what does intersectionality mean? What does it mean that you are discriminated as a black person and a woman? So it's different from being discriminated as a black person and a man. So you have to understand the dynamics, how they work together, and then tackle it. It's not sort of kind of an add-on. You have to kind of understand how they kind of come together and create these obstacles for people in working life. And maybe also I would be careful with this very strong causal linkages between better business and inclusion and diversity, because the causal linkages are very difficult to kind of pinpoint. Where does the profit or come from? Is it actually these practices? I would say, of course, because inclusive culture is much more than just sort of focusing on certain people. It's kind of whole culture needs to change, and it's on different levels of the organization. It's not only the top management who is doing it. It's kind of how we interact in our meetings in all different levels, and that kind of it's a long process.
Yeah, that's very true, and I think that because it's a long process and because it's a complex thing, if you're building something new, especially if you're building something new, it's very important to try and build it in early on. Again,
Definitely.
like to be aware of your biases, and for example, like I may be a woman, which puts me in a slightly weaker position in some context, but I'm also white, you know, and I'm in my home country, so I have a lot of privilege as well. So that means that I have to be aware of that privilege, and I have to try and make sure that I'm as sort of considerate of the fact that other people don't have that privilege as possible in any organization I would be building, which is tricky, but I think that should be the case.
I think so too. Yeah.
And maybe those are principles also that must be looked at the societal level as well. You know, not every company can do everything, you know, that is ideal. But, you know, people are different. You know, we also have to look, you know, that those people who are in danger of dropping out from the society, you know, there might be some companies that they can also be employed, you know, social businesses, etc., etc. So, they know, if you look at it in more bigger perspective, you know, there must be space for everybody. Of course, that's inclusiveness. But, you know, I really understand, you know, that, you know, some of the growing company that's is addressing the global markets very, very rapidly. You know, they have to pick up the best of the best talents, you know, and you know, they can't afford, at least at that stage, too much. You know, maybe later on, you know, when they are established, they can then look some of the branches that they could actually be more inclusive. But, you know, it's hard life.
Yeah. I would also think that in companies that are kind of in the process of digital transformation and they have a lot of labor that is not actually competent to do the transformation.
Yes.
So how you include those people, how you train those people, how you're trying to create new possibilities for these people if the organization is changing. I think that's inclusivity as well, and I think there have been some of these projects that are targeted to especially men of certain age who seem to be kind of dropping out from labor market because of these lack of digital skills.
Yeah, but, you know, it looks to be also that digital transformation is benefiting women at the moment, you know, because, you know, at least in cities, you know, and in urban areas. So and looks that the male workers, their jobs are more narrow. So, you know, if that is digitalized, they are out. You know, but, you know, if your job description or the tasks within your job, you know, are more broad, you might actually survive, and you can scope, and, you know, if you have the skills, and the women seems to have in skills. I'm speaking globally, not in Finland, but, you know, globally, the women who have been educated well, and there's no those cultural restrictions, you know, they can pick up those new jobs that are created, new tasks that are creating much better than men, you know. That has been a long time already in working life, and, you know, maybe they are losing now, so because their jobs are growing obsolete all of a sudden. So
interesting. There is a great question from the audience. We have been talking a lot about focusing in diversity from the beginning when you start the company and kind of growing it diverse from the start. But what about for those companies who realize that, we are lacking diversity? Do we have some advice for those, how to change the culture, how to attract more diverse people?
I think that's the same topic as we discussed already. So first of all, it's very important to have very high commitment from the leadership to fixing the problem, and then figuring out what is it that you are missing, as in what is it that you are missing, what is it that you would like to improve, and then, clearly measure the improvement towards your goal.
Simple advice.
Yeah,
just do it.
I
It's
agree.
very difficult when it's late. I think my advice is to fix it early, but if it's if it's late, it's difficult.
No, but I think that's really good and concise advice. And now a simple Google will already give you lots of like organizations who do work in this area, who have materials and advice, can give you advice to get started. and set very concrete goals.
Exactly.
Like
There are a lot
goals.
there are a lot of organizations that actually can help you, run trainings or educate you on the problems, etc. So Inclusive, for example, is one of them, working with tech. So that might be worth it, investing in something like this, or investing in a few trainings.
I also think that it's very important for the organization to understand what are the cultural obstacles of the company, because even if you measure, things don't change by measuring. So you need to be able to change the culture underlying that creates the practices. And then, of course, measuring is part of the puzzle, but kind of what are the obstacles in the culture and how to change it, and how to kind of create the organization-wide cultural change, because that's what inclusive culture actually means, that it's part of the organizational fabric.
And changing the culture is not fast, so you need to really be committed, like you said, that you don't kind of just run a short program and then that's it, but you need to kind of...
And the culture in different countries is different. Even in Nordic countries, I was laughing yesterday quite a lot, with one new ad. I don't know what ad it was, but the whole thing was, that Finn, Swede, and Dennis went to sauna, and Finn won. Oh. So we are so competitive. So even going to sauna is a competition. So, so we have very competitive and kind of competition-based society. And we might actually be different from our peers in Nordic countries.
And of course, overall, when you work with diverse teams, there is a lot of friction at the beginning. So it's typically a lot more difficult to make it work at the beginning. So I think you have to go through this painful period. But then hopefully you get a lot of different views to the table, and then we'll be doing much better long term.
Yeah.
So don't expect quick wins, that there is one person that you will get on board and then this magical person will come and solve your issues. That's not how it happens.
Yeah. I suppose the first thing the companies need to do is acknowledge the problem, as we were discussing, but and I think there is kind of a movement in that direction, that more and more people and more companies acknowledge that this and are trying to do something, but there's also the opposite movement in the society. So I wanted to ask about this. I'm sure everyone has kind of witnessed some cases of kind of hatred against women and this post-feminist discourse that's going on, that equality, haven't we already achieved that, and Finland is the model country of equality, we don't need to do anything anymore, or even that equality has gone too far and such. And I wanted to ask, what can we do about this? Do you think our organizations are doing kind of enough to stand up against such speech and discourse that's kind of lifting its head while people are kind of talking more and more about these things?
No.
Short answer.
Well, I approach it from a leadership perspective, because I think a good leader is empathetic and an active listener and doesn't question the subjective experiences of the people in the team, but is willing to accept them as their reality and then work based on that to create a safe environment where everybody can perform their best and feel that they are safe as who they are as human beings. And I think if you're failing to do that, you're also creating unsafe spaces for women and minorities. So I think, and we've seen examples of that in the media, and we probably, everyone we know examples about that one way or another, and certainly the problem is still there. I know globally we're doing all right, but that doesn't mean that we're doing great. It's a very low bar.
Yeah. I do agree.
Okay, nice.
And there's very, I think, globally quite strong backlash going on at the moment in terms of gender equality or diversity. So I think much more could be done to have a stronger stand on these issues. I think I haven't seen any sort of that leaders would have come out to support strongly or talk against these discourses. I think it doesn't come to my mind, but maybe I have missed it.
Yeah, and I think doing good things in this field doesn't necessarily mean having to talk to the press and saying this is important.
Yeah.
It means that the way you do things in your business, if you're in a position of authority or power, is to be conscious of that, and through your own behavior and choices, create change. I think that's the key. I don't know, you guys are nodding. Do you have something to add?
Also, you don't have to be in a managerial position.
Oh, true.
Just a colleague to take a stand.
Maybe this is a good point or in the discussion to take our final question, because you were already going or moving in that direction, but what I wanted to kind of leave as the last thoughts for the audience. What kind of good examples you have encountered or tools that you could give the audience, kind of examples of allyship or sponsorship or role models, something positive to end the discussion? One example from everyone. Who wants to start?
I have one from research.
Great.
Sort of the idea of being a tempered radical. You kind of want to stay in the organization, but you want to kind of rock the boat a little bit, to live through your values, and you can do it. There was a great example of a man who wanted to hire more minorities, and the time and the culture in the organization was not ready for it as a sort of a big approach, political approach change. And he started doing it himself. And then when he recruited minority members, it was a US company, he made sure that the members knew that what he's doing and kind of committed them to follow suit when they were in the position of authority. So he was able to create a huge change in 20 years just by one individual acting and kind of going forward.
I agree that it very much comes down to your own action. And for example, if you're an entrepreneur or if you are starting your business, think about, well, if diversity is important to you, think about how you can show it or how you can actually live by it. As in, what are the people you take money from? What are the people or who are the people in your board? So for example, now we finally see entrepreneurs say no to some funds without female partners, so to some funds with no diversity in the investment teams, or not taking, making sure that all the angel investors that back them have very diverse backgrounds and stuff like this. I think this is something new. We haven't seen it previously, but it's luckily happening.
That takes guts.
So again, if you're running your business, you are in control of the business, you are in control of people you choose to work with, so make sure that, you choose the right people.
Yeah, I know of someone who is like a relatively well-off middle-aged Finnish guy who has a reasonably good position and has taken as their sort of take them upon themselves to make sure that they mentor young women specifically into leadership positions. And I find that inspiring because I think that's very important. And I think men supporting women actively is still something that we don't often see, especially in public. So I think that's really cool, and that's a shout out if you're watching. I don't think he is, but I'm going to tell him that I call him out on it.
Great.
Well, I think I would actually say that also in public administration in Finland we have good examples. I think my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is a good example how it can grow actually very male-dominated branch of public administration to more equal, and and at least what we speak about gender, but not necessarily the inclusiveness in all the aspects, but this aspect, it can be done. It is possible, and even in quite short time, in a few tens of years, it doesn't take lifetime. And we are quite big organization, thousands of people working with us, and then more and more, even, there are female leaderships and leader positions, more and more. And now it's a majority, actually, if you count the heads. And, our government, look at that, that's what we have. It's it's something that everybody admires globally. So we have good examples and role models here already, and we are in a good way, but as you say, we are not yet there. So there's a lot of work to do. But I think we are good direction and a good speed in many ways.
Moving in the right
view,
direction.
Actually,
yeah. Yeah, it will take a long time if we don't do anything, but with actions we can make it faster.
Exactly.
Yes.
We can also live in hope of a better future when we do something about it.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah. But it's just so in responsibility. It needs, of course, that women are active and push us men more and more. But it also there is need for two in tango. That we need male leaders also who understands where to go and why to go there. So. Yeah. And there are more, and I see that there are more also. Even in my generation, I'm not the next generation anymore, but in my generation, there are people that, and male leaders who are, and male colleagues as well, who understands, and agrees also the goals that we have.
Thank you. And thanks again to all your speeches and participating. It was a great discussion. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the participants who are watching. I wanted to still advertise the next Unfolding Tomorrow event. It will be on the 3rd of November, so mark it in your calendars already. And that time we will have the topic SDG 13, climate action. Taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Thank you.